First of all, one of the reasons we write tests makes you more quality-minded. Additionally, the code that you write, once it's tested, gives you more peace of mind. You can ship with more confidence, ownership, and accountability. When you write your stuff, you own it, you take a better time to craft it and do it correctly. It'll influence your architecture and the things that you do, and it can unblock you, which is wonderful. Then you're not busy waiting for other people's code. And bottom line, that's the truth. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I hope I'm going to wake you up from your after-lunch coma. Lucy was right. I am very pumped. I'm going to try to actually keep myself calmer than I really feel inside. First, I would like to say thank you. Thank you to Swift Heroes, to the organizers, to the venue staff, to the sponsors. And I also want to thank the audience, because without an audience, there is no conference. So thank you all for being here today. And I feel like there's a little bit of an imbalance of power here, because the people on the stage always get to introduce themselves, but I have no idea who you are. So we're going to do a little break from the norm, and I hope you'll help me out with this one. Ta-da! Okay, so if everybody could please scan this QR code. Okay, great. So let's start with the question, where are you from? There we go. Okay. All right, so this will give us all an idea of who's sitting in the audience today. At home people, you too could have scanned the QR code, so if you're from home or whatever. Well, someone's from Sleepy, that's interesting. Someone's complicated. Okay. That's what I answer when people ask me where I'm from. I say it's complicated. Earth. Oh, okay, yeah, so the reason why it auto-locks is because otherwise we could keep on going on forever, but no, we're going to do that. Okay, so that's where are we from? Well, most people are from Italy, but wow, I see a lot of international people here as well. Okay, how many times have you attended Swift Heroes? Okay, so we see the majority of the people here are first-timers. However, we do have people who are at all of them. Next, how long have you been a developer? I could have said, how long have you been an iOS developer? But you can choose to answer according to your own feeling. How many years of Swift experience? Yeah, exactly. Okay, well, we have a lot of people who have been developing for a long time. Actually, we have a pretty interesting even distribution, aside from the very first job people. Okay, now this is a question that I need an answer for, because I just got a new work laptop, and I want to know, do people put stickers on their work laptop, yes or no? So that's real. Oh my gosh, why is it locked? Sorry. Isn't that interesting? Huh? See, now you get to know who's in the room. Okay. Okay, and last but not least, and very relevant to this presentation, do you write tests for your code? Now, isn't it nice that this is anonymous? No judgment here. Okay, so this is an interesting distribution. So we have people, very few people in this audience who have don't know anything about testing. We have some people who haven't written any yet. Sometimes, as you can see, is a majority. If I'm forced to, which means I really don't want to, but I will if I have to. And of course I do. Yes, Command U all the way. Okay, so during the course of, thank you for participating. During the course of this talk, we're going to cover a lot of things, but now I promise to tell you who I am. So my name is Leah Vogel, and I started iOS development in 2012. I'm currently a senior engineering manager at Chegg, and this is actually my first position that I'm not writing code on a regular basis. And if we're in confessions, how about I'm not writing code at all? Yeah, we'll get to more on that later. But I still am an iOS developer at heart. That still comes automatically. I can introduce myself. I'm Leah Vogel. I'm an iOS developer. No, I'm not. But that's really who I feel I am. And so you guys are my people. Yes. In addition, here's some other interesting things. That is me getting ready for Passover. One of the things we eat on Passover is horseradish. And if you've ever dealt with onions and your eyes water, then you should try dealing with horseradish. That would be a real fun experiment. However, goggles do help that. They do not, however, protect your lungs from the horseradish. So some interesting things about me. I'm a lefty. It's my first time in Italy. I managed to offend the coffee people downstairs twice yesterday, once by asking for decaf, and the other time by asking for just plain hot water. I'm originally from the United States. When I was in high school, I moved to Israel. I moved back for a time to London and then back to Israel, so that's where I live now. I have 6 kids. Yes, I used to be a teacher, and I really love reading. In my opening slide, if you saw it, it's me with books behind me because that's usually what I do. And even though COVID-19 happened, and COVID-19, as you all know, is COVID-19 pounds that you gained during COVID. So even though I don't look exactly like that anymore, I still like the picture with the books. And I do aspire one day to write a book of my own. Okay, so now that we've got that through, what are we going to talk about today? So first of all, I'm going to talk about my very first job, and otherwise known as what is a test, where I knew nothing about that. Next up, testing, who, what, and why. Notice that we don't have here how. Next level stuff, and of course, a summary. But first, basically what I'm going to hope to do is inspire you all, especially the ones who are forced to do it at gunpoint and have never done it before, to actually try. But again, a disclaimer, as I said, I'm not actively writing code. This is not going to teach you how to write your test, but more of the reasons behind it. All right, so here we go, chapter 1. Once upon a time, my first job started as a junior iOS developer. When I say junior iOS, I knew nothing. I had done an app development course. It was 80% Android, 20% iOS. Our teacher said, you're never going to get jobs in iOS. iOS in Israel is not a thing. So I was sure I was going to have an Android job, but my first job was iOS, and really I did not know very much. But I did learn some really, really important things in my first job. Like, one of the really important things that I learned was that you need to write code programmatically because that's the way that code is written. So a lot of the things that you learn in your first job, you take as given. Like, this is what everybody thinks, and this is just the way to do things. Another thing that I learned was how to interface with Git through the command line because that's just the way you do things. Additionally, another wonderful thing I learned was the interesting quirks of Objective-C and to enjoy them, embrace them. You know, square brackets, asterisks, all the fun stuff that you encounter in Objective-C. And, of course, that when you ship your code, you give it to QA because developers don't test their code. That's QA's job. We have our job. They have their job. This is how job security works. The developers write bugs. QA finds them. Repeat the process. Okay. All right, so where did I learn all this goodness? My first job was at a little startup in Jerusalem called Glide. Glide video texting, I know that kind of sounds like an oxymoron, but that's literally what it was. It's a messaging app and heavily video-based. Okay, so one day product came to me and said, okay, I want a new feature. This is the feature I want. I want if people send a message of a single emoji, it's got to pop. So we called this super emoji, and I was the one to implement this feature. So great, this is what it's supposed to look like inside of the app, is when you send an emoji, it pops. All right, easy enough. So I started writing my code. I wrote, okay, I'm going to make a thing called is single emoji. I hope everybody here knows this very complex syntax in Objective-C. Great, so how do you do this? I'm going to check that there's only one character. Otherwise, I don't need to. It's certainly not a single emoji. And then afterwards, I'm going to see, is it emoji at all? And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So I ran my code, and it did not work. Anybody know here why it didn't work? Okay, good. So I didn't know why it didn't work. I'm like, oh, one emoji must be 1, but apparently no. 2 equals 1 in emoji. So, all right, I'm going to update the code and say, okay, if the length is 2, then it's going to work. Great. So I did that, ran my code. Yay, it worked. I was so happy. I went to show it to my team lead and like, look, I wrote the feature. He was also surprised I finished it so quickly, but let me tell you, the emoji code was on Stack Overflow. I didn't have to figure that part out. Anyway, so I showed it. I sent a message with emoji, showed it that it popped, and then he sent a message with an emoji, and it did not pop. And I'm like, what happened here? I was very, very confused because it's a single emoji. It's just a flag. So he said, this is a teaching moment, all right? So that's wonderful having a team lead who likes to mentor you. He had a teaching moment. Not all teaching moments are created equal in the company that I work with. He had a different kind of teaching moment that looked like this. If somebody made some kind of really bad error, he would literally print out one of these and stick it on the wall next to your computer, and then you will never forget to do that again. This is actually one of the ones I got, and yes, it was me who messed up with the manage object context and core data. Okay, so he says, let's write a test. And I'm like, what's a test? And he said, it's just what it sounds like. okay, so what does this mean? He goes, okay, step number one, a test has to test only one thing at a time. So split up your code. You have your is emoji and is single emoji. Those are two different things. Don't combine them. Okay, fine. So this is the emoji code that I copied from Stack Overflow, which actually works very nicely. And so now he says, this is how you write a test. You set up your variables. You write your assertions. You run your test, passed. Wow, that's so exciting. He goes, now let's see what happens when you put the flag in. So put the flag in, and of course it did not pass. We're like, why? Why doesn't it pass? It's just one emoji. And then I got a very interesting lesson. But again, wait, I used to be a math teacher, so I know that 2 equals 1 now. But he then showed me this. And I'm like, what is this all about? And that was, whoa, I had no idea. So that's what it was about, and we're not going to go into in this talk because that's not what we're talking about today. But then I understood some context. Just as a side note, Swift is not like that. That was Objective-C code. This is Swift code. You can just count your characters and it equals 1. Thank you. Okay, so updated the code. Now it works. Everything is wonderful. So what did I learn? I learned how to write a test. I worked at that startup for 4 years. Okay. This was about 2 years into my job there, and afterwards, the company kind of made a Swift. Oh, I heard about testing in other contexts inside the company because we had the video streaming SDK, and I used to hear them, the test run. Like, test run? What tests are they talking about? You just write a test for an emoji. But yeah. So, company made a pivot. I don't know if anybody here has heard of RiskCam, but RiskCam is a product developed by the Glide team who rebranded as Endless Technologies back in the day. I worked on this project as well. It's really cool, actually. It is a watch band for the Apple Watch that has cameras, front-facing, back-facing. Got to use a lot of interesting technologies. I learned how to use SpriteKit. That was fun. And if you've ever worked at a company that pivots into hardware, then I guess you know what happens next. This is what happens next. And yeah, so after 4 years at Glide, I found myself having to find another job. Now we're up to chapter 2. So let's learn a little bit more about testing. My next position was at a company called Orcam. Orcam Technologies is also a Jerusalem-based company, and they develop smart assistive devices. What you see here in the picture, there's the lady wearing the Orcam Eye, which connects to glasses for people with visual impairments, and someone else who's using the Orcam Read, which is also for visual impairments and also for dyslexia. They do some other assistive technology as well. While at that company, I gained a lot of experience working on Bluetooth because all of these devices would connect to the associated apps via Bluetooth. And well, while I was there, I heard a lot about testing, not in the mobile department, but people working on the back-end stuff, on the algorithms, and I'm like, okay, so everybody's talking about testing. I don't know what this means. So I did the logical thing that most people do is they go and they make a phone call, right? And who do they call? They call their little brother who knows everything. Because just for context, my little brother's last position, he was senior director of engineering, so he knows a thing or two. So I actually joined the industry in 2012, and he had been programming probably since the early 80s, so he really does know a lot of things. So I said to him, tell me about testing. I don't know anything about it. He was horrified. He said, how have you lasted in this industry for so long without knowing anything about testing? I'm like, I don't know. So he sent me a bunch of stuff and said, learn all these things, read up about it. This is how you do it. Okay, fine. I read about it. I gained some skills. I understood how to write a test or two. Great. Started applying things. Let's write a unit test, another unit test, a little integration test. Amazing. Now I want to present it to my team. I was the team lead and a mobile developer at that position. And they said, why? And I said, well, I don't know why. I just know that it's apparently very important. So figuring out why was actually an important thing to do. So let's talk about a few reasons why we should write tests. In general, I don't know if anybody here has heard the TED Talk by Simon Sinek. I think he also has the book with the same name called Start With Why. But when you tell people why they're doing things, it helps them get on board and understand the context. So yeah, start with why. So here's some reasons we should write tests. Well, one of the reasons is craftsmanship. As a developer, you want to be a good craftsman or woman. And you want to make sure that the code that you're writing is crafted well. You know, have some pride in in the profession that you're doing. So that's one of the reasons to write tests. But another main reason to write tests is reliability and peace of mind. Because if you know that a good amount of your test code base is covered by tests, then when you add new features, you can have confidence that you're not breaking anything. And then when you ship, you have a lot more confidence in what you've been shipping. Ownership. When you write your own tests, you're not saying, okay, I write tests, QA will find my bugs. You take ownership and you're accountable for the code that you write. And interestingly enough, testing itself influences the architecture of the things that you are building. Like as you noticed before, when I had the emoji code, there was is emoji and is single emoji. Now, it could be that we would add a feature in the future that might use just the is emoji code. And by separating things and having single responsibilities, it makes things a lot cleaner. Additionally, when you're writing testable code, you're also using things like dependency injection, and so everything has their own areas of responsibility, making your code more solid. All right, so tell my team, okay, everybody's ready. All right, we're all hyped. We're going to add some testing. And the question is, where on earth do we start? So by then, we already had a pretty mature code base. We had lots of modules doing lots of things. So where should we start? So we decided that the place that we're going to start is one of the areas that had the most shared resources. Because we had a few different apps for each of the devices that we were using, so we decided it probably made most sense to test the code that's going to be reused in the different apps. All right, so that's where we started. And now we're going to talk about types of tests. So unit tests. Unit tests is the very basic building block of your tests. It tests a single method. It should just test a single method without other side effects and things going on in there. If you would think, for example, like a login screen. So an example of a unit test might be test password validation. So that's a very small unit of code. And then we have the integration tests, which are a few things and how they fit together. So if we're back to the login screen, so you can imagine that we might be testing the input password and then send to the server and server response. That's already integration with other things. And then, of course, we have the icing on the cake, which are the end-to-end tests that test the entire feature from the user's point of view. So that goes for, like, from the UI, like the person actually taps the text field, inputs the stuff, et cetera, until things are returned and you get a success or a failure. So that is the whole end-to-end test. Now, the testing pyramid generally looks like this. You write a lot of unit tests, less integration tests, less end-to-end tests. And one of the reasons, well, two reasons, it takes a lot more time to write the end-to-end tests, and it also takes a longer time to execute the end-to-end tests. However, there are also people who feel that the pyramid should be inverted, and there should be a lot of end-to-end tests because they generally cover some of the steps that you would be doing otherwise. Like your end-to-end test would obviously include some of the integration logic that you would like to test. All right, then comes the question, so who's supposed to write the tests? Every company is different. If you're an indie developer, you know the answer to who's going to write the tests. And I've seen in places that I've worked that usually the developers are in charge of unit tests. Sometimes the integration tests are shared between developers and QA are in charge of the end-to-end or UI tests as well. All right, so as I said, I was working in a company, did a lot of Bluetooth. If anybody here has worked with core Bluetooth and written tests, you know that you cannot run core Bluetooth on the simulator. So that's really frustrating, because here I'm like, hey, let's do tests, and we can't even test the most basic unit of our code. I mean, before anything else, we have to be able to test the Bluetooth. So how do we go about doing that? So the way we go about doing that is saying, okay, what is my Bluetooth manager supposed to really do? So these are, high level what I wanted it to do. I want it to be able to connect, disconnect, send messages, change its states. And once you can extract the logic of what's going on, makes it really easy to do the next thing. Mocking, as Leo mentioned in his talk before, mocking, super important. And as soon as I had a mock Bluetooth manager, I could use this for my testing and then have it do the different things I wanted it to do. And I could use this for an integration test to test my business logic to see if it was working. Alrighty. So that was cool. It worked. Wonderful. So let's talk about the next level. So what happens after that? So after working in OrCam for 3 years, I joined Chegg in November 2020. Chegg is an educational company based in the USA. very widely used. Every fourth student in the United States uses Chegg. I got a lot of people, also internationally. And yeah, work on educational solutions. And the position I joined at Chegg was an engineering manager, which, as I mentioned before, did not include hands-on coding. But one of the things I noticed right away was, wow, Chegg has a lot of tests. There's a lot of tests going on in there. When people would run their code, here's some GitLab stuff. This is something recently. I will like to draw your attention to that number. There's a lot of tests going on in the code, which is really cool. Aside from that, we have all kinds of tools that our automation engineers have written. One of them is a report that goes to Slack. We have different triggers that trigger different types of tests. We have smoke tests, we have regression tests, we have all different kinds of levels of testing. And after each one of the test suites runs, a report is sent to the Slack message, so you can see how many pass, how many fail. That link to report over there shows a report using Allure, so you can really dig down and see what's going on, and it helps us maintain good quality of code. So that was really cool to notice that here I am at a company that has a really nice testing culture, far more extensive than I had been exposed to until now. However, as I mentioned, I wasn't doing any of the testing. I could just watch everybody else doing the testing until we had a hackathon. Hackathon was fun. We had a global hackathon in 2021. I worked on a team with our SRE and our IT manager, 2 back-end engineers, a designer, and me and another iOS developer. And I joined this team in the capacity of an iOS developer, which was really exciting because I'm like, yeah, you get to write some code. So what did we do? We developed an app that was very appropriate at the time because it was in the midst of COVID, and there were limitations of how many people could actually be in an office space at the same time. So it was a system to reserve space inside of the office. So we had discussions about the architecture, how's it going to work, and whatever. We really worked hard on making it a pretty well thought out application. The designer did some really fun stuff with it, and I actually thought I would do a video of like the whole thing, but I don't want to waste too much time. Anyway, I really liked the thing in the end. We really tried to make it space themed, so yeah, Houston, we got a problem. Okay. All right, so then I thought, wow, I have a really good opportunity to try something out that I've never tried before. I tried TDD, and for all of you who are sitting in the audience, you all know that TDD means tequila-driven development, because that's what you do. And if you've never tried it, it's really a lot of fun. This is my laptop. That's my little brother who knows everything's laptop. And we sat one day and, well, it was over a few days, and we were writing a Chrome extension, and it was heavily powered by tequila. But jokes aside, TDD is test-driven development, and the premise of TDD is that you actually write your tests before your code is ready. So this red box, what is a failing test? If you write a code that's going to test a method that hasn't been implemented yet, of course it's going to fail. So you write the method, how you expect it's going to work. It really forces you to think about all the different edge cases, what success looks like, what failure looks like, etc. Then you write your code minimally to make the test pass. Okay, now it's working, okay? Then refactor, and you keep going around in a circle, and that's TDD. So it was really a lot of fun to be able to apply that. When I was working on this app for the hackathon, so the division of responsibilities between me and the other iOS developer, he's like, okay, I'll take all the UI. I'm like, and I'll do all the networking. Okay, so I was the networking, and so writing the networking code and being able to write the mocks beforehand was really good. Yes, so that brings us to another reason why testing is really good, because if you are able to think about how your code is supposed to work, and you structure it in a way that you know what your requests are, you know what your responses are, et cetera, you can unblock yourself. Like, I was ready to write the networking code. It was ready way before the backend had actually deployed the service. But by making the tests and making the mocks about the expected responses that I was going to receive, I could unblock the UI part as well. And then it was really helpful because once they did deploy the backend, just running the tests and changing to where they were pointing, I could point out flaws in some of the code that they had written. All right, so yes, as we said, if you mock things, you're able to unblock yourselves. That works also very well when I was in OrCam and we were interfacing with devices. Again, there were sometimes features that we were ready with before the server, which was the actual device, was ready, and by using mocking, that enabled things to work well. All right, we did not win the hackathon. but we did have a lot of fun, and I felt like I gained some experience on something that I had never tried before, so that was really good. Okay, so let's sum up everything that we have learned here today. First of all, why am I giving this talk? What is the point of this talk? What is the bottom line? So I didn't teach you how to write any tests, but I do really hope that people sitting here today will be a little bit more inspired to either write tests in their own code, or at least while they're writing tests that they're being forced to do a gunpoint, the person could take down the gun and just, okay, so there's a lot of value into what we're doing here. Additionally, I know that Hidde said that he has all his code covered by unit tests because indie developers do that. So actually, even as an indie developer, it's really worth it to write tests. Why? Presumably, you're not going to be only working on one app forever, but if you're going to be working on that one app forever, you might as well have it work well and be very robust. However, if you're shipping a bunch of apps, you're probably going to be reusing some components. So kind of like the shared components that I mentioned at the beginning when I was working at Orcam, that is probably something that's worth it to write tests for also as an indie developer. Okay, so let's sum it all up. First of all, one of the reasons we write tests makes you more quality-minded. Additionally, the code that you write, once it's tested, gives you more peace of mind. You can ship with more confidence. Ownership and accountability. When you write your stuff, you own it. You take a better time to craft it and do it correctly. It'll influence your architecture and the things that you do. You make sure that your methods are only doing single responsibilities, that your code is modular, that you're using dependency injection, etc. And it can unblock you, which is wonderful. Then you're not busy waiting for other people's code. And bottom line, that's the truth. Okay, well, that's it for me.